prophethood cannot come outside of our confines. It has to be us. It has to be our tribe. Are you telling me that this, which is clearly evidence in the Talmud, in the Old Testament, in the words of the rabbis, are you telling me we should forget about this because we're scared to be labeled anti-Semites? That this should not be a part and parcel of the analysis of why Khaybar and Banu Qaynuqa and Banu Nadir and Banu Qurayza acted the way they acted? Are you telling me we should completely disband that and not speak about that? Facts. Let's explain. Because someone is going to be thinking, okay, this is the third time, or in fact maybe even the fourth time, where you've spoken about Banu Nadir, and you've spoken about Banu Qurayza, and you've spoken about Banu Qaynuqa, and now you're speaking about the Jews of Khaybar. There are 4 clashes in the seerah between Muslims and Jews that we can see, that we can identify. Now we now have to start putting our interpretation hats on and start being honest with ourselves and saying, why is this happening? There needs to be some kind of explanation mechanism. Because someone will say, look, Islam is a hostile religion, clearly. It's attacking the Jews at every opportunity it finds. Look at this. It cannot be a coincidence. But let's look at it from another perspective. It's very interesting. There is a concept referred to as the narcissism of small difference. Others refer to it as the narcissism of minor difference. Okay. And this is a psychoanalytic precept. And the idea is, when you have a people that are more close to each other, but there are some differences, there's more likely to be clash. So if you find, for example, in early Christianity, you'll find that, the Arian controversy or something, or Catholics and Protestants. I mean, Catholics and Protestants, if you know anything about European history, they had some of the most bloody wars against each other, more so than wars with other people. Shiites and Sunnis, I mean, not as much as the Catholics and Protestants, actually no comparison whatsoever. But compared, we wouldn't consider them to be big difference compared to the atheists, for example, or Christians. There's more similarities that we have than, do you know what I mean? And the same thing could be said with Judaism and Islam. Of all the religions on the face of the earth, isn't it interesting that the 2 probably most closely related religions are Judaism and Islam? If you are looking at it from a psychoanalytic perspective, when you have people of a similar belief system, but there are some clear differences, psychologists like Freud, by the way, and I've gotten something here for you to read, would refer to this as the narcissism of small differences. The differences are seen as big, even though they may be small compared to other things, other, for example, comparisons. Like compare Islam and Judaism on the one hand, and Islam and polytheism. Which one has bigger chasms and greater disparities? Obviously the latter. So that can be a way of, for example, if you're a Jewish I don't know if you want to call it clergy or political leaders or even cultural leaders, and you're seeing this new religion, you consider it to be a new religion, which is speaking about Moses, is speaking about Abraham, is speaking about Noah, is speaking about all the things that you know. It's even referring to them specifically. There's no other religion that speaks about Jews as much as Islam, and refers to Jews in as much in the same way as Islam in the primary text. Not even Christianity does, which is interesting because it's a continuation. You see, so the point is what I'm trying to say is, then you're seeing this other religion now is acting as a competitor, and just like somebody is more likely to be jealous of their own, let's call it brother. Sisters are more likely to be jealous of each other. Co-wives are more likely to be jealous of each other. Brothers, Yusuf and the brothers, for example, could be. People of the same race are more likely to be jealous and angry with each other, cousins. Why? Because it's like there's direct lines of comparison. But if you're now competing for religious market share, then you're more likely to be jealous and resentful of people who are competing with new market share. So you can employ psychoanalytic approaches to the behaviors of some of the Jewish tribes and reactions to Islam. And you could use this idea of the narcissism of small difference as an idea of why were they so hostile? Why were they continually collaborating? We wouldn't say, and this is where it does, someone could say, well, you're trying to be anti-Semitic again. So we're not saying this because of their biology. We're not saying any of that. We're just saying this is a natural way that anybody from any background respond. And this is in fact backed by some kind of psychology. So that's one way of doing it. To get even more controversial, one could say another way of doing it is because of Jewish supremacy theology. And we've already spoken about this. And just to remind you of this, is we've mentioned this man, Rabbi Schneerson. And just to remind you of what he said, all creation, including the heavens and the earth, are vanity compared to the Jews. And you got Rabbi Ovaida Yusuf. He says the purpose of the Goy, which is the Gentiles, the purpose of the Goy is to serve the Jews. He asks a question. He says, why are non-Jews created? It couldn't be because Allah wanted to test them and to see if they were going to do good deeds or bad deeds. It couldn't be the purpose of life for these guys. It couldn't be because they, to make the best of themselves and to see how much of the potential they could realize. It couldn't be for these reasons. But in fact, the reason why these people were created is that they plow and they will reap. And we will sit like an effendi and we will eat. So I told you this guy was eating something. Say, the food is here, somebody must have made it for me. And it's for those guys to make it. For those servants to make my food, my sandwich. You telling me that this idea was not present in the past? Nani, let's be honest with each other for a second, This is a strand of Jewish opinion. This is an interpretation of Judaism. This is Jewish theology supremacy. Now, let's be honest with you. We know that I didn't bring to you the quotes of the Old Testament and the quotes from the Talmud. I could do that, and it will be an entire session on justice. I could bring all the quotes of this. I brought to you the quotes of the rabbis so that you can't say, well, you're misinterpreting it. It's not my interpretation. It's the interpretation of your top dogs. You had the Enlightenment period. You have the Renaissance. You have the Enlightenment. You had all this. You have liberalism proliferating throughout the world. You have all of this. Do you think now, are things diluted or are things not diluted? Do you think liberalism, now we know that the dominant world order is liberalism, would that dilute some of this propaganda or some of these talking points? Or would it not? I think it would dilute it. It's wrong for you to say this. Racism is seen as wrong now, in the West and everywhere, most in the world. Most parts of the world, racism is seen as wrong. So to say stuff like that, which is clearly racist, of course you're going to hide this. Which is why you'll find mostly the sources that these things I found them from are Hebrew sources, which I've translated for your convenience. Because what's said in Hebrew is not usually what's said in English. Because there's two kinds of discussions, two kinds of discourses. What you'll see in Hebrew is much more flagrant, much more wild. They can say what he wants. And they all laugh in the room. Not all the Jews don't believe this, of course. But I'm saying the ones in the room who follow these rabbis, they'll laugh and yes, we agree, of course, it's slave. You think I'm meant to be like this Arab? In present day, Israel is the most racist country in the world. Or at least it's a contender for it. Present day Israel. Do you think, here's a question. Does this kind of discourse from the top leading rabbis in the world today, does it feed into that racism or does it not feed into that racism? Of course. Look at the depiction, for example, of Ismail in the Old Testament. As a homework, in your own time, he's referred to as wild. I think as a wild donkey even. Dehumanized. Why? Because he's the father of whom? The Arabs. You can't have a prophet that comes from another race. It has to be from our people. And this is what the Jewish supremacy theologians and proponents would say. This is why there was such hostility. In fact, we have primary source information. Safiya bint Huyay, and we'll cover this. Her ex-husband, when Safiya had the dream that the Prophet ﷺ, she had the dream the moon would come to her lap or something, and her husband, he interpreted that as there'll be a king of the Arabs who you're going to be with. He couldn't accept it, and he started attacking her physically because he understood, how could it be that it comes from these people? Prophethood cannot come outside of our confines. It has to be us, it has to be our tribe. Are you telling me that this which is clearly evidence in the Talmud, in the Old Testament, in the words of the rabbis, are you telling me we should forget about this because we're scared to be labeled anti-Semites? That this should not be a part and parcel of the analysis of why Khaybar and Banu Qaynuqa and Banu Nadir and Banu Qurayza acted the ways they acted? Are you telling me we should completely disband that and not speak about that? If you are telling me that, I think that would be unfair. I think you're unfair to say this. I think we should reject such a thing. So when people ask, oh well, why is the Prophet acting like this with these people, with these Jewish supremacy theologians? Zionism was, if you're saying it's Zionism, then Zionism was in the 1900s. I'm not saying it's only Zionism, I'm saying it's also Jewish supremacy theology, which predates Zionism by thousands of years. And Zionism incorporates parts of that, even though some Zionists might not even be religious. They may be secularists, they may be atheists, but for some reason they've still incorporated this idea that they're special and they're chosen, and everyone else is Goy and Gentile and servant. And of course, if you think that, even the studies that are done on narcissism, one of the studies that I looked at was, and I read, don't ask me why, but I've read multiple books on narcissism. I've read multiple books on it. The studies say that when you're always told that you're right, that you don't have any corrective parents, your parents, think about this, studies show that if you don't have parents that tell you you're wrong from time to time, you're wrong, that you're always mollycoddling them, this and that, you're more likely to have what they call narcissistic traits. Now, imagine now, not only do you have a parent that's telling you you're always right, your God is telling you you're always right, no matter what you are, because of who you are, not because of your actions. It removes you of individual responsibility. Any action that removes you of individual responsibility is an action that it will grant you, or will entrench and embed within you this idea of entitlement. And what is entitlement? Most definitions I've ever come across in psychology of the word entitlement is that where you believe that you deserve special treatment without cause or reason. And that is exactly Jewish theology supremacism. Jewish supremacy theology. That is it. That you are right on the basis not of what you do, but on the basis of who you are. Now some will object and say, well, that's not what we believe. We're Jews, we don't believe in this. I say, I'm not generalizing. I'm not saying all Jews believe in that. I'm not saying even all Jews believe in Judaism. We know that some Jews are atheists. They're ethnic Jews only. We know all of that. But I am saying that this must be considered.